Morning everybody, hope you're all doing okay, hope you're safe, hope you're well, hope you're managing, hope you're coping with what's going on. It's really weird at the moment, isn't it? Anyway, I thought I'd pop on to connect with you. Unfortunately, I don't have like a really nice Corona Hope t-shirt like Martin had. I do come to you courtesy of the Corona crocheted hairband, which is doing its best to keep my fringe out of my eyes. I think I'm going to ceremonially burn it as soon as this is over, but there you go, at least it doesn't take so much washing as Martin's t-shirt. I thought I'd pop on because I've had this one question that's been going round and round and round in my mind over the last couple of weeks, over the last week or so particularly, and it won't go away, so I thought I'd come on and share it with you guys this morning. And the question is, what do you want your new normal to look like? What do we want our new normal to look like, apart from the obvious, like access to a hairdresser so I can get rid of this? That would be great. You see, the thing is, these times that we're living in are not normal. We know that. I'm stating the obvious here. You know, even if tragedy hasn't come knocking directly at our own doors, even if we're not coping with, you know, real grief, real anxiety, real distress, even if we're some of those people that are kind of safe and looked after and protected at the moment, this is not normal. These times are not normal. And lots of people are having those conversations and talking about what happens when we get back to normal. What is normal going to look like? What is our life going to look like as we go on? And talking about things like the stuff that we always thought was important, but it turns out isn't really that important. And also the stuff that we didn't really understand the importance of, and now we're missing, you know, stuff like our families, stuff like our friends, stuff like, you know, all of that. So what is our new normal going to look like? And I've really been thinking about this over Easter because I'm really empathizing actually with Jesus's disciples and what they went through at this time of year, if you like, or this time when we think about Jesus's death and resurrection. And these bunch of Jesus's friends, these really normal, ordinary people, they've been around Jesus for 3 years, and then they just had their feet knocked out from under them in kind of the worst way imaginable. They didn't see it coming. See, all of this time that they've been with Jesus, they've been led to believe that what Jesus is going to do is that he's going to come and he's going to give them everything that they think they need. And what they think they need more than anything else at the moment is to be rescued from these Roman authorities who they were living under. And they were oppressed and they were having a really hard time of it. And Jesus is going to come, and Jesus has been saying all the time, I'm going to be your saviour, I'm going to be your Messiah, I'm going to be the one who rescues you. And they think that that means that he's going to rescue them from the Roman authorities. They knew what they thought they wanted their new normal to look like. And basically what they wanted was for their new normal to be roughly the same as it always was, only a bit better, only without this rule of the Roman authorities. And that's where I'm empathising with them, because isn't that what we want? Really? Isn't that what we always want? We want our futures to be kind of the same as they've always been, just a little bit better. You know, if we're fortunate enough to live in this beautiful part of the world, and most of us have enough money, and most of us have friends, and most of us have family, and we are really blessed before we even start. But what we actually want is for our new normal just to be that little bit better than it is now. We want our futures to be that little bit more financially secure. We want our, I don't know, our skirts to do up that little bit better than they always have. We want the same, we just want it a little bit better. And that's what the disciples wanted. And far from things turning out how they thought they were going to, they find that their whole worlds have been shaken and everything's been knocked upside down, because far from Jesus come flying into Jerusalem and rescue them from the Roman authorities as they thought he was going to. What happens is that he submits himself to the Roman authorities. And then a few days later, a few hours later, they see him hanging on a cross, being crucified, suffering the most horrendous death that a supposedly civilised society could think up. and they're lost and they're alone and they didn't see it coming, and they're locked in a room and they're frightened and they're anxious and they're scared. And I've identified with a lot of that stuff lately, because we're kind of locked in a room, aren't we? You know, metaphorically, even if we can get out to the shops, and we don't really know what the future's going to hold. And then for those disciples, the weirdest thing happens, because all of a sudden people start coming to them and saying, we've seen Jesus, he's alive. And then more than one person comes, 2 people come, and then Jesus appears to them, and then he appears to crowds, and it's this triumph of hope over what your experience is, over what their experience is. It's this triumph of hope where Jesus is saying, actually, death can't beat me. Actually, you can try and break down and destroy the hope that I bring, but you're not going to do it, because I've beaten death and I'm alive. And that's the thing about the Easter story. That's the whole thing. It's the hope. It's the fact that in Jesus there is hope. There is always hope. And Jesus' friends go on to be transformed. And why is that? Why do they go on to be transformed? Well, it's because Jesus offers them a new normal that is far outside anything that they had dreamed of, anything that they'd imagined, anything that they could hope for, because Jesus brings more hope than we think he's going to. You see, and this is the same for us now, as it was back then for Jesus' friends, as it was for the disciples. Jesus didn't just beat physical death. Jesus put to death the need to be fearful. We don't need to be fearful anymore, because Jesus has beaten that. We don't need to fear loneliness anymore, because Jesus has beaten that. We don't need to fear financial insecurity anymore, because Jesus has beaten that. Jesus has put to death all of our fears, and he's given us hope instead. So the question I want to ask as well is, if you didn't have to fear anymore, what would your new normal look like then? If you didn't have to worry about what society might think of you, if you didn't have to be consumed, as we all are, with the things that we think are important that maybe we've realised aren't so important anymore during this time. If actually the fortnight's holiday in Cyprus, lovely though it is, isn't the most important thing. If we didn't have to fear anymore, what would we do? What would our new normal look like then? I think it's really interesting. Jesus met a disabled man once while he was here. He met this disabled man, and he said to the disabled man, what do you want me to do for you? And the thing is, Jesus still asks us the same question today. What do you want me to do for you? Do you want to be able to live a life where all of those boundaries and expectations and fears of getting it wrong are the thing that drive you? Or do you want Jesus to do something else for you? The thing is, society is going to get back to normal at some point. That's going to happen, and please God that, you know, we are all let out sooner rather than later. But society will be trying to press us back into all of those things that we were doing before. It's going to have to. It's going to try and press us back to go spending. It's going to try and press us back to go shopping. It's going to try and, you know, get the economy moving and all of that stuff. And what our society is going to do is make us desperately try to be exactly the same as we were before. It wants our new normal to be exactly the same as our old normal. But Jesus says to us, what do you want me to do for you? And what do you want your new normal to look like? And by the way, like, if you're sitting there listening to this because it's popped up on Becca's Facebook and this is a weird thing, and you think that that's all great, but this isn't for you, that's okay. Jesus is all over people that think that it's not for them. Jesus surrounded himself actually with people that thought that it was all very lovely, but it wasn't for them. You know, one of his best friends, Thomas, when he was told that Jesus was alive, he said, yeah, right, okay, you're all nuts. I'll believe it when I see it. And Jesus came in and showed himself to Thomas, and Thomas went, oh, okay. And Jesus didn't, you know, Jesus was cool with that. Jesus is okay with that. The first person that Jesus revealed himself to when he was risen was a woman. And not only a woman, but a female sex worker. And her testimony wouldn't have stood up in court of law in the times. You know, she was nothing. She was not the sort of person that this should have been for. And yet Jesus revealed himself to her first. Jesus is all over people who think that it's not for them. So, if you want your life, here's the question. I'll finish waffling now. But if you want your new normal to be a life where anything is possible, then maybe use this time, maybe use this waiting time, maybe use this in-between time, maybe use this time when we've been forced to stop, to ask Jesus some questions about what he thinks your new normal should be.